Greetings, this is Cratic, and today I'll be going over a Torment 13 build for the Condemn Crusader. This build has been put out on this channel previously, but it's newly revised, and quite a lot of good changes coming into this build in particular. It features the Gloves of Worship, but no longer relies on the Gloves of Worship, so it's a fully functioning build even without shrine buffs, and I'm very excited to bring this to you today. Alright, so let's go over the skills and items. At a high level, you'll see a lot of movement abilities here. Steed Charge, Iron Skin Flash, Laws of Hope, using the Lord Commander. We have Warzekian Arm Guards in this build, with the Wreath of Lightning, and the Crumbs Buff Belt, and of course, Gloves of Worship do provide the Fleeting Shrine buff, if you happen to get that. So a lot of movement in this build. Drawn Quarter is the rune we're using on Steed Charge, just to pull along enemies as you're moving, helps you to kill off density as you're on the move a little bit more effectively. The reason we don't need the Endurance rune longer Steed Charge is because the idea is to continually cast Condemn even when you use Steed Charge. And Condemn, when you're using Autocast or Numlock, will interrupt the Steed Charge itself. So we're not going to get full benefit from the duration of the Steed Charge anyway. So we might as well pick a rune that's going to help us pull in more density, pull them along, help kill them quicker. While Condemn interrupts the Steed Charge cast as such, just like that, interrupts the Steed Charge. The Steed Charge also slows down the Condemn ever so slightly. So when you do cast Steed Charge, it's very hard to notice this unless you've been playing the build for a while, but it does delay the Condemn cast ever so slightly. So if you're looking to do max DPS, I don't recommend using Steed Charge when you're engaged in combat with, say, multiple elite packs, that sort of thing, high density situations. You want to avoid using your Steed Charge. Steed Charge is more for those less dense rifts, to just help you skip through them quicker, and also if you get moderately dense rifts, killing one elite pack, using the looting your items, then using the Steed Charge to get to the next elite pack that's kind of farther away, is quite a nice way that this build allows you to get around. We're using Lord Commander to reduce the cooldowns on Steed Charge base, and yeah, it's a fairly nice placement of utility here. While Lord Commander is my preferred fourth passive here, it isn't 100% required. I do highly favor it, but if you wanted to, say, go for that double second life for extra safety when getting hit by, say, Molten Explosions, that would be a great option. Going Holy Cause for the increased damage and the extra life regen here would also be a great option. Cool thing with Holy Cause is it might let you run, while I haven't tested this, it might let you run a different affix on your shield, more offensive condemn damage. Skill roll probably would go well there. And of course, you know, if you want other defensive affixes, Wrathful, Vigilant, anything else you can think of can go in this fourth slot that you prefer. Another of our movement abilities is Laws of Hope, Wings of Angels. Huge synergy here with the Crumbs Buff Belt. You wouldn't think it, but this tiny shield of 100k or so, a little 124,000, actually gives us enough damage buffer typically in the build to help maintain the Crumbs Buff Belt bonus and keep you from getting hit. Then again, if you do get hit in this build by enemies, it's not such a detriment because we have the Iron Skin Flash, and the Flash rune, of course, giving us that extra movement speed when we are hit while Iron Skin is active. Iron Skin, of course, doesn't have high uptime in this build by default, but it should be at or around 50% for most of the time you're playing, and there are a lot of different mob types that will be able to hit you, so whether you're getting hit or avoiding getting hit, you will have movement, and it feels very smooth as far as a balance of movement that these two provide. We also have huge synergy here between the Wreath of Lightning and the Warzekian Arm Guards, that give 50% movement when we destroy a wreckable object. Wreath of Lightning has a high proc chance with Condemn, so it will be going off quite often in this build and hitting those destroyable objects, which then keeps up your Warzekian Arm Guards throughout the Rift. Very handy in my opinion. For pickup radius, we do have the Avarice Band in this build by default, so when you start playing this and you don't have the fleeting buff, you will be using Avarice Band to help get you that extra pickup radius, picking up gold, picking up orbs, super quick, scooping them up, and sending you on your way. And we are using Boon of the Hoarder, which gives us 30% movement speed as we pick up gold, and since we will be picking up gold very often with this build, this will be a nice boost, fairly constant boost to movement speed. There's one swap in particular that is highly advantageous, and that's when you get the fleeting buff. Pair the Gloves of Worship, this will last for 10 minutes. Fleeting Shrine gives 25% move speed and quite a bit of pickup radius. Now I recall that we have the Avarice Band in the build, providing that pickup radius bonus. Since we no longer need that when we have the Fleeting Shrine buff, we can effectively swap out this ring quite easily for some other ring, such as Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. Zodiac being my favorite and probably the best option for this build, giving us reducing the remaining cooldown of skills, and it chooses a skill randomly when we hit with a resource spending attack, being Condemn, the only resource spending attack in the build. It's fairly random, but it's very effective, and it does improve the quality of life in the build quite a bit. So whenever you have the Fleeting Shrine buff, make sure to swap in the Zodiac. When it drops off, you can again swap it back out. I do advise having a gem leveled up. The most effective or the lowest level gem you could probably do is Wreath of Lightning. Would be the easiest to level up, just to 25. Pop into your Obsidian Ring, have a second one leveled up on your Obsidian Ring rather, and just swap it out as soon as you need it. Resource in this build is well managed. We are running both the Akkhan's Addendum and Provoke to manage resource. Akkhan's Addendum, of course, being highly beneficial for giving us the Prophet and Embodiment of Power runes. Embodiment of Power being the rune, of course, that allows us that extra resource regeneration up from 5 to 10. And then the Rally rune we are using, reducing our cooldowns on abilities when we use the Akkhan's Champion, so it's sort of random in that sense, but a lot of utility from this rune in particular. And then we're also gaining the Prophet rune for our second life and the additional armor. Note here that you do have to watch out with this second life passive if it's the only one in the build, as I am depicting now. You might have issues with, say, Molten Explosions. You get hit with multiple Molten Explosions that would kill you each individually anyway. You're probably going to die. So you have to watch out for certain attacks, but other than that, the build should have enough defense to get by. Also, rolling Wrath Regeneration on this weapon as well. That will be a required roll. You can opt for RCR on your shoulder if you need. That is an option. Provoke, of course, on castability, giving us that extra resource regeneration. Hitting enemies will generate an additional 5 Wrath per enemy taunted, which is quite nice. This also reduces the attack speed of enemies and slows them, so you want to try to use this on elite packs, but it's not required you do so, especially in Torment 13. Do cast this on the Rift Guardian though. It will reduce the incoming damage that you receive from the RG. Yep, so basically cast this on cooldown, try and cast it near enemies to generate additional Wrath. One of the neat side effects of utilizing the Akkhan's Addendum, we don't have to kill the entire elite pack. If you were using In-Geom, you would have to kill the entire elite pack to gain that bonus. And this, in combination with the build not relying on the weapon bonus, such as In-Geom, for mobility, means that we are a lot freer. We don't have to kill elite packs. We don't depend on killing an elite pack for mobility. It's just a lot more fluid, in my opinion. Alright, and let's move on to the offense in this build. Is typically going to come from a few different sources. We have, of course, the Bane of the Trapped, giving us that 40% multiplier. We are using the Stone of Jordan in this build, giving us a huge sum of elite damage. My Stone of Jordan, note here, does not have the proper holy percent roll that I would need, holy damage roll that I would need, but even with not having this, just having the cooldown and the increased damage against elites can work quite nicely to help you deal more damage and get through the rift a lot quicker. Other damage sources, high damage multipliers, of course, always going to have the Fighter's Wrath. The one I'm using now isn't perfectly rolled, but can be if you get a good one in season. And then, of course, in the cube, we're using the Blade of Prophecy, huge multiplier for our damage. Also triggers Condemn explosions, extra Condemn explosions, which also proc area damage, which is pretty big for this build. Not that we're going to need it for T13, the extra area damage that is, but assigning area damage in Paragon will be a little bit higher up on the food chain. Maybe not top priority in Paragon, but higher up for certain. Heavenly Strength, allowing us to wield that two-handed weapon, very important with this build. Finery, boosting our strength, extra offensive modifier here. Something I forgot to mention previously, Long Arm of the Law, is boosting the duration of Wings of Angels, helping us achieve somewhere in the realm of hopefully 85% uptime on this ability by default when we don't have the Empower buff, which is quite nice. The set, of course, forgot to go over this, giving us that large multiplier that is going to give us extra damage, extra defense, and reduced cost of abilities while Akkhan's Champion is active, which does go help us reduce the wrath cost of Condemn, which is quite nice with this build. As far as defense is concerned, the Prophet Rune gives us that additional armor boost, the set bonus as aforementioned, 50% less damage, and then on occasion you will get the shrine that's called Blessed. This Blessed shrine buff from the Gloves of Worship will give you 25% reduced damage, which is a nice bonus to have, but not up all the time. Life recovery is also pretty important to have in this build. Most of it is supplied through life per second regen, just life regen, and we get that through Paragon. Is a good source. You also get the loyalty from your Templar. We have the Wings of Angels rune, of course, giving us that 10,000 life per second. There's also the option to roll life per second on your boot slot in that 4th affix. This will give you up to about anywhere from 28 to 36,000 or so life per second regen, which is a nice source of life recovery. The other portion that we have in this build is from life per wrath spent. So this build is a very hungry build as far as wrath is concerned. So when you put even just one roll that maybe only up to 1200 life per wrath spent, I think an ancient can roll up to 1600 maybe, but basically the value of this roll on the shield is improved simply because we are spending more wrath and recovering it through wrath per second rather than reducing our wrath cost in this build as much as some other builds might. So that's the idea, is that this will be your second source of health recovery, and both of these two combined should keep you up and running quite nicely. Another buff that is very useful for the build is the Empowered Shrine buff. The Empowered Shrine gives us that 50% increased cooldown reduction and increased wrath regen for the build. Stays on for 10 minutes, pair the Gloves of Worship. This amount of cooldown is huge. It puts you up somewhere in the 70s as far as cooldown reduction is concerned. So you don't really necessarily need the Leoric's Crown at that point once you get this buff, and you can potentially swap it out for one of any number of different items. I'm just going to give, it's not very important what you put in this slot, just know that there are some alternatives that you could do. the one I will be favoring during season will definitely be the Broken Crown. Broken Crown, of course, giving us those extra gem drops when we're going through these Nephilim rifts in season, can help with augmentations later on as we will have more resource available. Also helps with re-rolling items in general, especially jewelry, having those extra gems on hand. Another couple of different swaps. You can wear the Helm of Akkhan and we can swap out the amulet instead. Could go for the Flavor of Time. DPS option would be to get a Holy Crit with Strength. So you'd have Holy Strength, Crit, and just go for straight DPS, that extra roll on the Flavor of Time, giving you some extra strength for the build. Quite a nice addition if you have a well-rolled Flavor of Time on hand. These are kind of hard to come by though, so you probably won't have that available. If you have a well-rolled Eye of Etlich, similar situation, Holy Crit, and a socket, you can run with the reduced damage from ranged attacks. Defensive option, quite nice. Potential option here, you gain poison immunity from the Mara's Kaleidoscope. Again, Holy Crit with socket would be preferable. And another potential swap, you could wear the chest piece that's called Gold Skin. This would give you 100% extra gold find, which would be very nice to have collecting that extra gold in season. Yep. Just some suggestions, and if I think of any more, I will list those on the written guide, so do check that out. For affixes, we've been through most of these at this point, but let's just recap them real quick. Cooldown as much as possible on gear. That means shoulders, gloves, both rings. You're going to want a cooldown. Weapon and shield with cooldown. We're getting the diamond in the helm, and from Paragon as well. Can swap in the Vigilante belt, as I mentioned before, if you don't have enough cooldown. The extra option here on the shoulders going with resource, so you could go strength resource, crit condemn damage, or you can go, you can even drop the condemn damage and go, strength vite or all resist, and then just cooldown and resource would be adequate, I would say, but having the condemn damage there on gear does help out quite a bit. So going condemn damage here, condemn damage on your breastplate for sure, good to have. As mentioned before, I do prefer the life barrage spent, but if you want to go all out offensively, you can put in that place condemn damage. I don't recommend that, but that is an option as well. Of course, offensive affixes, you're going to want crit on amulet, helmet, bracer, gloves, rings where applicable. Certain rings like the Stone of Jordan will not be able to roll crit for our particular build, or you won't want it in the perfect ring configuration. The shield, of course, going to want crit. You're going to want that wrath regen, as I mentioned, on the weapon as well, required. And strength, vitality is a big one for both the bracer. You want vite on bracer, vite on the helmet for certain. An option here on chest, you could go strength vite condemn damage, or you could go strength elite damage reduction and condemn damage. That would be more of a higher Paragon configuration on the chest piece, and I do recommend if you roll with strength, elite damage reduction, and condemn damage, you supplement a little bit of Paragon with vitality into Paragon. Belt, of course, we're going to want all resist. You're going to want all resist on your pants and on your boots. Some of these items that I have aren't perfectly rolled. You're going to want life percent on your belt, vitality on your pants, and then the fourth affix, as mentioned on the boots, you want strength vite, all resist, and then either armor, but I have been preferring the life per second, as mentioned. And that's about it. I mean, your Stone of Jordan, you're going to want holy percent, of course, cooldown, and then elite damage. Avarice Band, of course, you want crit, but can be difficult to get that sort of ring. So if you have to go a strength crit cooldown Avarice Band, that is totally fine. And then, of course, when you're swapping in the Obsidian Ring of Zodiac, make sure you have a crit cooldown resource. It's not a common configuration for the Ring of Zodiac, but you definitely want that extra resource instead of the attack speed. You're definitely going to want diamonds with this build, both the pants and the chest piece. The only reason I'm not wearing all diamonds right now all in the sockets here is because for testing I'm using a lot of int items, which would increase my all resistance, and I didn't want to skew the results as far as the testing was concerned. I want to thank you for tuning in to watch this video. Quite enjoyed testing this build, a very comfortable setup. I do like that the Gloves of Worship offers a varied experience during your gameplay. If you get lucky, you get excited when you find those proper shrines, right, that give you that humongous boost to either movement, speed, pickup, or cooldown, whatever it is. It just gets you excited, right? So that's a very fun aspect of this build. The other part that made it worthwhile to me was these latest revisions make it so that, again, you aren't dependent on having those shrine buffs. It feels comfortable even without them. They feel more like a bonus rather than a detriment, and that is huge. Yeah, so thank you, and I'll catch you in the rifts.